So, if you clicked on this video, then you know that Netflix recently released their live-action anime adaptation of One Piece. Now, for anyone who has been following my channel may know that when it comes to my, what's the best way to describe it? Intense, toxic, hateful relationship, yeah, that's it, with live-action anime adaptations, then you may know that I wasn't exactly thrilled or excited that they were making this show. I have a particular grudge against Netflix about live-action adaptations because the last time they tried to pull this shit, it almost killed me both metaphorically and literally. You see, I was originally planning on making a video about the live-action Cowboy Bebop show, but I eventually gave up on that plan because the show was such fucking asinine dog shit that I legitimately couldn't get past the second episode, and the only reason I was able to finish the first was because I had like 6 to 100 drinks to help me deal with my pain. I almost died because of Netflix's Cowboy Bebop, and so when I heard that they were going to make a One Piece show, I made it my mission to avoid it like the plague when it was released. Suddenly though, I started hearing a lot of buzz and positive reviews about the show, with numerous people claiming that it was actually unironically good. Rotten Tomatoes gave the One Piece live-action show relatively high scores from both critics and general audiences, and while I know that Rotten Tomatoes is practically worthless, and no one with any real taste in film or credibility gives a shit about this site, it was still an indicator that at the very least a majority of people tend to like it. At first I simply disregarded these positive reviews because I just assumed they came from the same nerds who unironically like these stupid movies, but then I kept reading and hearing more things about it, so I decided to relent and give the show a shot. And so, after a week of sitting through all 8 episodes, I was left with the big question, the reason why you probably clicked on this video in the first place. Is this One Piece live-action series actually good? Yes, but also no. Let me explain. Now, I'm going to preface right now before I get into my analysis that this is not going to be some exhaustive side-by-side comparison video where I go over every little thing about the live-action series that was recreated or changed. 1, I haven't read enough of the manga. 2, I don't have the time to make something like that. And 3, even if 1 or 2 weren't a problem, I still don't think making a side-by-side comparison is an effective way of properly analyzing and explaining what I do or don't like about this show. Just like in my Ghost in the Shell video, I'm more interested in examining what this One Piece show did well on its own while also using the One Piece manga as a point of reference. So if you're expecting an exhaustive side-by-side comparison video, might I suggest Watch Mojo or Cinefex or even r/One Piece. Anyway, just wanted to clear that up. Let's just jump right into it. Now I'm going to focus on the positives first because I don't want to start off as a Debbie Downer already, so I'll get into my issues with the show later. For now, I will say this. I can wholeheartedly say that this is the best live-action anime adaptation I have ever seen, which isn't really saying much considering the bar wasn't high anyway, but in all honesty, there are elements about this show that I found actually kind of impressive. For starters, I really liked the presentation of this series in terms of both its production value and its visual look. Production-wise, there were surprisingly a lot of practical sets and props that were built for this show, whether it be the actual pirate ships people sailed on, to the insides of buildings like Zeph's restaurant or Buggy's clown carnival, to even some of the fight scenes where it actually looks like the characters are fighting in real areas and not on green screens that look fake and bullshit. All the practical sets and props they built helped the show feel authentic, which already makes this so much better than like every other cancerous live-action anime adaptation where they over-rely on green screen and CG. Additionally, and I briefly hinted at this before, but the action scenes in the show are also surprisingly great. While I still think the action scenes in the original manga are 100 times more visually engaging, what I love about the action set pieces in this live-action show is that they don't bother with recreating the fights one for one. Part of what really sucks balls about most of these live-action adaptations is that they are so desperate to recreate iconic fight scenes from their source materials that they end up just completely falling flat and looking just really ugly. But in the One Piece live-action show, they know that no matter what they try, they're never going to recreate exactly what the manga did without it looking stupid, so instead they focused on making the fight scenes look good within the context of TV. The show incorporates a lot of long takes and medium to wide shots that allow the action scenes to not only look good, but allow the audience to easily discern what's happening. Compare this to the fight scenes in something like Cowboy Bebop, where they cut every 2 fucking seconds. It looks like the show is having a brain aneurysm. Everything is just so clean and presentable when it comes to the action set pieces in this One Piece show, and the fact that a lot of the actors are doing their own stunts just makes the fight scenes that much more engaging and entertaining to watch. And while yes, the fight scenes will every now and then look kind of shitty due to some questionable uses of CG like this, and this, Most of the time, Luffy's stretching abilities didn't look like total shit, and the slicing effects with Buggy the Clown also didn't look like shit. Overall, this is a pretty good looking show. However, my favorite part of this One Piece series are the characters and the actors who portray them. Now, this was my greatest concern going into this series because this is always my biggest issue with these anime adaptations. The live action versions of the characters suck, whether it be because the actors are playing weird, edgy, edgelord YA novel versions of what their counterparts should be, or try way too hard to be exactly like their anime counterparts that it just comes across super cringy. The portrayal of these classic characters always what suck most about these live action adaptations. But with the One Piece show, they took a different path when depicting the characters because, as I mentioned earlier with the fight scenes, they don't focus on recreating everything one for one. They focus on taking what works in the manga and then transforming it into something that works within the format of live action TV. And that's exactly what happened with the characters in this Netflix One Piece series. They took the core elements of all the characters and turned them into something that both works in live action while also making them feel familiar enough that you can immediately recognize them as Nami or Zoro or Usopp or Sanji or especially Luffy, who is easily my favorite character in the whole series. Iñaki Godoy, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly, perfectly encapsulates Luffy's character from the anime/manga while also having it feel compelling and unique within the context of a live action setting. What I was so especially thankful for with this live action adaptation is that they surgically removed everyone's anime specific traits, because not only are these things specific to and can only work in anime, but to see similar shit happen in live action just comes across really stupid. Seeing Goku eat a ton of food is funny in Dragon Ball Z, but it's cringe when Goku, quote unquote, eats a ton of food in Dragon Ball Evolution. While you still get hints of everyone's anime specific traits like Luffy always being hungry, Sanji hitting on women, Zoro's constant drinking, Nami's obsession with money, and Usopp being a little bitch, they are all toned down to the point that it feels believable within the context of this show. I mean, as believable as you can get about a show called One Piece. Anyway, those are all pretty much the positive things I have to say about One Piece, so let me get back to being a nitpicking and biased, I win bye, Debbie Downer weeb, and talk about what I don't like about this show. Now, before I get into my biggest issue with this One Piece series, I'm going to quickly skim through some of the more minor yet equally noticeable flaws of the show. Firstly, the costume design. Now, while overall I do like a lot of the costumes that these characters wear, in which they balance both the iconography of the manga while also making it look convincing in a live action setting, at certain points some characters just end up looking really stupid. This especially became a problem for me with characters like Mary, Sham, and Bucci. They look less like believable characters and more like cosplaying weeaboos at your local anime con. And I also had a similar issue with the Arlong Fishmen pirates, as a lot of them look equally stupid, and while I did eventually get used to their look, I still just couldn't shake this feeling that they just look like guys in makeup and costumes. I mean, I guess the alternative would have been to just have them wear dots and mocap suits, which honestly I think I would have preferred, since when done right you can make believable creatures like the Arlong pirates, but whatever, that's just me. Also, and this might just be an issue only I seem to have, but I really don't get the hype and obsession with this live action version of Buggy the Clown. Don't get me wrong, the main actor who plays him, Jeff Ward, does a great job portraying the character, and the episode where he is the main antagonist is solid. But my problem with this is that unlike the manga, where after he's defeated, his place in the story is pretty much over and doesn't really play a major role again, aside from these really fun intro prologue shorts that are both entertaining and add to the overall narrative, the show has such a massive hard-on for this character that even after his role in the story is over, they keep shoving him into other episodes for literally no reason. And it would be one thing if it was because he had a greater role in the story, like he teams up with Arlong to try and defeat Luffy and get the map to the Grand Line, but that's not what really happens. Instead, Arlong kidnaps him, rips his head off, and then shoves him into a bag, which gives him the opportunity to say stupid jokes and cringy quips for literally the rest of the show. Every time this guy pops up, it's just so that he can get more screen time to say whatever stupid bullshit, and it gets so old so fast that I audibly groaned every time Buggy came back. And this random change to the manga is indicative of my biggest issue with this live action show, is that a lot of the changes or revisions they made to the source material ends up mostly being for the worse. Now, I should reiterate, there are some new twists that this live action series makes that not only work incredibly well for the show itself, but honestly improves upon the source material. For example, I do like how Kobe and Helmeppo are incorporated into the Netflix series. In the manga, after Luffy frees Zoro, Kobe and Helmeppo pretty much exit out of the main storyline, but you can still see what they're up to with these fun prologue shorts, and I thought it was a smart move for the show to essentially adapt these short volumes and incorporate them into the greater narrative. I also like how the show incorporated Garp into this season as well, because even though Garp is not in the East Blue Saga, his role as this overarching sort of antagonist that chases after Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates while they're doing their typical shenanigans was a good way of adding an extra layer of conflict, along with all the other stuff that happens in this series. series. So while there are some changes that I think were for the better, there were a lot that were kind of for the worse, or at the very least not nearly as effective as the manga. And while I could go down a laundry list of all my issues, I'm going to specifically mention two because in my opinion, these are some of the most unearned moments in the whole show. When Sanji says goodbye to Zeph and the Berete chefs, and when Nami asks Luffy for help. At the end of episode 6, Sanji breaks down crying as he joins the Straw Hat Pirates, and it's supposed to be this big emotional moment because Sanji is leaving his mentor and his family. The problem is that I feel absolutely nothing when this scene happens because it didn't develop the characters properly to earn something like this. In the manga, the reason why this moment is so emotionally powerful is because it's slowly built up. Oda not only explores Sanji's relationship with Zeph through their backstories, but he also develops his relationship with the rest of the chefs at the restaurant. While Patty, Carne, and the rest of the background chefs aren't the most complex characters in the world, they had enough personality and moments that allowed them to shine, that allowed Oda to highlight the sort of family Sanji has developed with the chefs and why they mean so much to him. It's what makes the fight against Don Krieg that much more powerful because not only is Sanji protecting his family and home from Don Krieg, but by watching Luffy and Zoro fight, he has a better idea of what it truly means to follow one's dreams and ambitions. Luffy tells him that he wasn't saved to waste his life away at the restaurant for the rest of his life, he was saved so that he could accomplish his dream of finding the All Blue. And this is even more apparent when Zeph orders the chef to pretend his cooking stinks. Sanji is too stubborn to be told to leave, so they have to resort to trickery to get him to follow his dream without having to explicitly tell him, which Sanji gets the picture. So when Sanji finally leaves to join Luffy's crew, it makes their final goodbye so much more emotionally heartbreaking. We spent so much time with these chefs and now they have to say their goodbyes. But in the show, they just cut corners and speed run as fast as possible to get to the next plot point in the manga, but still expect you to have the same emotional attachment as I did in the manga, but I just don't feel anything. What is the point of recreating the scene where a starving Jin asks Sanji for food, which by the way was just so poorly executed in the live action series, only to literally move on to the next scene as if it never happened? Why did this moment even need to happen? Is it to communicate the fact that the Grand Line is a dangerous place where even the strongest pirates can be killed? Then what was the point of Mihawk mowing down Don Krieg's men and killing the guy himself? I thought the scene existed to communicate this same point. Why did they replace Don Krieg with Arlong as the pirate who invades the restaurant? Because doing so removes all the subtext and layers that Don Krieg served in that arc. Why did Patty show up to wave goodbye to Sanji when he only had like 3 lines in the whole show and all of them were just him talking shit to Sanji? Who are these assholes waving him goodbye? It makes sense as to why Zeph would feel emotionally heartbroken for Sanji leaving. They do a good job in developing their relationship, but what about all these other people? Why does the live action show sacrifice the subtlety from the manga and have Zeph straight up tell Sanji that he's wasting his life at the restaurant and that he needs to leave to find the All Blue? How is that better or an improvement over the manga? In the manga, Sanji actually learns something and has a reason to leave, but in the show he just gets told, lol, you're a loser, and then leaves with Luffy because the story said so? I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking or overreacting, but I don't feel like I am, because considering how faithful this show has been to the source material, I don't know why they didn't just try to follow what the manga did in this situation. They would have accomplished everything that they wanted narratively while still having the emotional heartbreak for the audience to experience. And speaking of emotional heartbreak, let's talk about the other scene that is completely unearned, the moment where Nami asks Luffy for help. This is one of the most iconic scenes in the manga/anime, and on paper the live action show technically hits the same beats as the source material, but as with the Sanji leaving the restaurant moment, I don't feel anything when this scene happens because it didn't properly build up to this moment. The reason why Nami asking Luffy for help is so powerful is because of the events that led up to it. The Marines that technically should be helping the villagers steal all the money she spent 8 years trying to collect and then branding her as a criminal while ignoring the threat Arlong poses, the villagers revealing to Nami that they knew her plan all along and tell her that she doesn't need to sacrifice herself anymore for them, and then charging to Arlong Park to fight for their freedom despite their inevitable doom and Nami pleading them not to. The combination of all 3 events are so heavy of a burden on Nami's shoulder that she starts breaking down crying, stabbing her tattoo, and pleading Luffy for help. And it's all been properly built up. I am as emotionally heartbroken as Nami is. But in the live action show, they only do the first thing I mentioned with the Marines stealing her money. For some reason, that is enough for her to start breaking down crying and cursing Arlong as she stabs her tattoo, which I guess within the context of the live action show is good enough. I guess it hits the bare minimum. But then when the villagers reveal to Nami that Nojiko told them her plan and that they're going to fight and most likely perish, that doesn't get her upset. This is exactly like the Sanji subplot. Why are they cutting so many quarters and not just closely following what Oda did in the manga? You would have accomplished the exact same goals with even more emotional resonance. But nah, fuck that. We gotta make more time for Buggy the Clown and his stupid antics. We gotta make more time for action scenes, and Grandpa Garp acting like both a stereotypical Asian tiger parent and stereotypical drunk Scotsman. So anyway, to make a long story short, those are my somewhat detailed thoughts about the One Piece live action series. It was certainly 100 times better than what I was expecting, and dare I say it, it was kind of fun, but ultimately I don't think it's nearly as good as most other people are saying it is. While I don't think this is a bad way to introduce One Piece to a new generation of fans, I still implore these new fans to give the manga a shot. It's long as shit, but I promise you that it's a lot of fun. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Take them or leave them. Comment below why I'm wrong or stupid or whatever, and have a wonderful day.